How did the Falcons blow a lead to the Josh Dobbs led Vikings? Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me, of course. I'm Aaron Freeman, your very humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast. And today's Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. It's going to help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, as you can probably tell from my demeanor, if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your preferred audio podcast platform, shout out to the everydayers that are tuning in currently. And if you want to become an everydayer, make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. But you can tell my demeanor is not peppy, right? Obviously, because the Falcons lost another very winnable game at home to a depleted Minnesota Vikings team, 31-28. And, 28 points. You look at the scoreboard and you're like, man, we scored 28 points and probably could have scored more in this game if they had done a better job in the red zone and gotten their first 30 burger of the season. 28 would be a season high regardless of that. And you're like, man, how did we lose this game? And how did the defense give up 31 points in this game, right? Because, you get a season high from the offense this week, and you also get a season high from the defense in terms of the points they gave up. And, probably the big difference was the fact that both teams turned the ball over twice in this game. The Falcons had 2 turnovers in the second half, and the Vikings scored 10 points off of that, and that really sort of got them back in the game. And the Vikings turned the ball over twice in the first half, and the Falcons only got 6 points off of those, right? And not to mention the Falcons also got a safety in this game. More on that later. But, it's disappointing when the Falcons were beat by Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs entered the game for the Vikings on the third series because Jaren Hall got knocked out of the game at the end of the second series trying to run it in at the goal line and got it concussed. And Josh Dobbs, who was just traded to the Vikings this week on Tuesday, basically didn't practice this week because Hall was getting all the starter reps, and backup quarterbacks don't play, as you guys well know. And looked like a quarterback that didn't practice all week long and had no plan and all that stuff early on in this game, right? His first series resulted in that safety. That was only his second drop back of the game where Calais Campbell was able to wrap him up in the end zone. His second series, he fumbled trying to escape the pocket. Arnold Ebiketie knocked the ball loose. Lorenzo Carter scooped it up and returned it down to the 1-yard line, and somehow the Falcons failed to punch it in at that point later. We'll talk about that later. And then on his opening drive of the third quarter, he had a fumble where, I think it was David Onyemata got credited with the strip, but basically he just bull rushed an offensive lineman into Josh Dobbs' arm, and then the ball popped up, and Kentavious Street, the Falcons' own trade target, sort of was there to catch it in midair for a fumble recovery. And of course, the Falcons only scored 3 points off of that turnover. But, after that point, it seemed like Josh Dobbs seemed to get pretty comfortable, right? And the 2 giveaways that the Falcons had in the third quarter after that point, a Bijan fumble, a Heinicke interception, sort of gift wrap, very favorable field position for the Vikings on the Falcon side of the 50-yard line. They were able to turn that into points. And, the Falcons defense, in addition to giving up those points, also gave up some big plays in this game. They gave up 5 explosives, 5 20-plus yard plays. The explosives, that's what we talked about last week against Tennessee. 4 of those 5 plays were passes. And it looked like from, we'll see if the film confirms this, but looked like watching it live, all 4 of those were hole shots when the Falcons were in cover 2. And for those of you not familiar with that, that's in the cover 2, the corner is covering the flat, and the deep safety covers the deep half of the field, and there's a hole in that zone along the sideline between those two defenders, and it looked like 4 of those big explosives came on hole shots, right? Josh Dobbs doesn't need to practice as a NFL quarterback. He understands I got cover 2, I got to attack that hole, right? That's a basic element of NFL quarterbacking. So without practice, he could understand that stuff. And then the 5th explosive play was Josh Dobbs scramble, right? And he had a couple of scrambles. I think he had 2 more scrambles of 10 plus yards in this game. He finished the game with, leading both teams in rushing, if you can say that, with 66 yards on 7 carries. And so basically the reason why the Vikings were able to drop 30 on the Falcons defense was they were able to exploit those hole shots in cover 2. Whenever the Falcons were playing, that specific type of zone, trying to get eyes on the quarterback because of Josh Dobbs' scrambling ability, right? Wanting to keep more eyes on the quarterback, and they were exploiting that. And then when the Falcons it seemed like most of his scrambles came when the Falcons were playing man coverage, right? And didn't have eyes on the quarterback, and Josh Dobbs would run around, make a couple of guys miss in the open field, and scramble for big gains there. So simple, turnovers were a big part of it. We talked, why the Vikings were able to drop a 30 burger. Why were the Josh Dobbs led Vikings able to drop a 30 burger? Turnovers were one of them. All right, we've talked for several weeks that whenever the Falcons offense gave the ball away or had bad field position, the defense found ways this season to get stops. That hasn't been the case the last couple of weeks. They didn't do that against Washington. They didn't do that today. And whatever mojo, black magic, Ryan Nielsen sort of had this defense cooking with for the first, month or 2 of the season seems to be running out. But then again, that's probably just natural regression, right? That getting all those stops early in the season was probably, the fact that the Falcons got all those stops in the first, 4 or 5 games of the year, when most teams that would be spread out over the season. And so, regressing to the mean, I guess. The other issue, too many explosives. The Falcons weren't a great zone team because they don't really have a great pass rush. And I think only half of their secondary is really good in zone. Like Bates and AJ are good in zone, but, Jeff Okudah and Richie Grant. And then Mike Hughes gave up the game winner in zone to Brandon Powell, Falcons legend. And then you had poor tackling, right, on those Josh Dobbs scrambles. So that seemed to hurt them worst time, and that was basically it. How did the Falcons lose this game? So, let's talk about the offense. We'll talk about the Falcons' own quarterback issues, right, with their new quarterback. And the scoreboard would tell you that, this was a great game for the offense, but, I don't know if that's the case. So we'll talk about, whether Taylor Heinicke delivered with this, offensive output in today's game as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, we know that the Falcons' success depends on having the right team, and certainly a lot of questions about whether or not this team is the right one based off of their performance the last couple of weeks. But you don't have to worry about, finding the right team, because you got LinkedIn Jobs. They will make it easy for you to get the right people in for your small business, so that you can reach your goals in 2023. LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you find the right people faster and for free. It's real easy to create a free job post in minutes with LinkedIn Jobs. And then they give you the simple tools like screening questions that's going to make it easy for you to focus on the candidates with the right skills, experience, to quickly prioritize who you want to interview, who you want to hire, all on one platform. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So let's talk about Taylor Heinicke. And did he make a difference? Not really. You look at the box score: 21 for 38, 268 yards, a touchdown, an interception. In addition to that interception he threw, felt like there was probably at least 3 more passes that could have been picked off. So 3 more turnover-worthy plays. And, basically what I saw on Sunday, and I'm curious if you guys felt differently, but I thought this was going to be the case and kind of confirmed it, is that making the switch from Desmond Ridder to Taylor Heinicke was a lateral move. Like, I remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about Desmond Ridder basically being in the Taylor Heinicke phase of his career and hoping that he would break through out of that. Obviously, Arthur Smith didn't feel like he was going to do that, so he made the move to Taylor Heinicke, but it's a lateral move. Now, I'm sure, Arthur Smith in his post game and his Monday presser is going to be asked about, are you going to make a change at quarterback? I don't know what he said post game. We'll find out afterwards, but I'm not going into this week assuming that there's going to be another quarterback change. I think if they do go back to Ridder, which probably is unlikely at this point, I would assume that'll be after the bye week, which is coming in 2 weeks. But this game to me illustrated exactly what you've heard me say all week long and basically all season long, which is, everybody makes it about the quarterback, but the Falcons' issues are, to me, with the 10 other guys, right? And it's not to sit here and say that the quarterback is a non-issue, right? The quarterback has been an issue this year, today and for the previous 8 weeks. But to me, the bigger disappointment is not, hey, the Falcons have inconsistent quarterback play, given who their quarterbacks are, Taylor Heinicke and Desmond. Like, again, you're getting I don't know. Again, I'm not going to say you're getting exactly what you thought you were going to get, but they're not disappointing me in the ways that I think they're disappointing other people. I think other people had these super high expectations for these guys to do way more than what they're doing. And I'm just like, this is what they are. Again, hoping that Ridder by the end of the season with more reps would break through this point, but we'll see if we get that opportunity. But to me, the thing that's been disappointing me is, where's the run game? And the Falcons' run game was basically non-existent in this game, or ineffective in this game until the final drive, right? And that was the game go-ahead potential game-winning drive. And it was kind of telling that on that drive that the Falcons, ran 13 plays for 79 yards to take our 28-24 lead with 2 minutes to go, capped off with a Tyler Algier touchdown. And 11 of those 13 plays were designed runs to the running back. And the 12th one was a Heinicke scramble. So they didn't, Arthur Smith wasn't putting the game in Taylor Heinicke's hands to go out there and win it. Right. So, that tells you, but like, that ain't new, right? We saw that all throughout last year, so, hey, I ain't mad at it. If it works, the problem was that was the only time it worked. Right. But it was nice to see the run game working. Right. It wasn't working prior to that. They ran 57 yards on 11 carries on that final drive, not counting Heinicke's 13-yard scramble. Prior to that, they only had 14 carries for 33 yards in this game, rushing the ball to the running backs, not counting Heinicke's scrambles. So they couldn't run the ball for 3.5 quarters. And as I said, watching this game, Heinicke looked like Heinicke. He looked exactly what I thought he was going to be, which, again, I don't think is much different than what Desmond Ridder's been giving you for the last 2 months. But he was out there, doing his best Brett Favre impression, and, that led to some positive plays, that led to some negative plays, And that's okay if you have a stable foundation or floor for your offense, which is based around your run game. But again, it was non-existent for 3.5 quarters. And, the thing that personifies the Falcons' inability to run the ball comes off of that first Dobbs fumble where they had the ball starting at the 1. Chris Lindstrom gets a false start, backing them up. Then they get a couple of yards back. Then they have 2 plays on 2nd and goal from the 1 to punch it in. Arthur Smith decides he wants to call a jet sweep to Jonnu Smith. I mean, I guess it's not as bad as calling a Taylor Gabriel jet sweep on third down, or was that a 4th down? I can't remember. It blocked it out of my mind which down it was, but I guess that's better. It's not a good call, but it's better than it's not the worst call I've seen. It's not the worst call. It's not the worst jet sweep I've seen at the 1 yard line from a Falcons offensive coordinator. Let's say it's second worst, but it's and then they run it to Tyler Algier on 3rd and goal, and he gets stuffed for 4 yards. And are people starting to believe me when I sit here and I say, like, why isn't the running game working? Oh, because the offensive line is not as good. That sequence perfectly illustrates that. It ain't about, they're loading the box. They were loading the box last year. Like that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard from folks. Oh, like teams are gearing up to stop the run. Like you don't think teams were gearing up to stop the run last year when they had Marcus Mariota and they couldn't throw the ball? You think teams were like, oh no, we're going to play with like super light boxes? It's ridiculous. They were able to run the ball despite the fact that teams were gearing up to stop the run last year. They can't do it this year. That's the problem. And then the other thing on offense that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the quarterback is penalties, right? The Lindstrom false start, that was one of 2 false starts that he had on that drive. Then he had another critical false start on that final drive, that game-winning potential go-ahead drive that, pushed the Falcons back to a 3rd and 9. Right. And fortunately, Heinicke scrambled to convert, thereafter. So it didn't basically end the game for the Falcons, but it could have. You had a Van Jefferson OPI at the beginning of the second quarter that wiped out a 4th down conversion on a screen of Patterson. I think they had 8 penalties a game. We know the Falcons are a team that does not get penalized a lot under Arthur Smith. That has been one thing that has been consistent and reliable, is that they don't shoot themselves in the foot. But this year, whether it's penalties, whether it's other things, turnovers, etc., they're constantly shooting themselves in the foot. So again, we can keep playing musical chairs at quarterback, guys. Heinicke, Ridder, Blue Steel, Ferrari, Latigra. It's the same thing, guys. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. So until the other 10 guys on this offense start doing their job, start playing better, doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Right? Neither one of these guys has shown that they're good enough to consistently win you the football game. So you need all 11 of these guys, the quarterback and the 10 other guys, to come together to win you the football game. And that's gets us to the conversation about the head coach. Right? Because I already know the comments are blowing up. Fire Arthur Smith. Fire Arthur Smith. So let's talk about Arthur Smith and his job security after this one. So we'll get into that, as well as some positives, to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, you can score early this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with a winning $5 bet, moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And guess what? Hey, I know most of you guys watching, listening, your team is the Atlanta Falcons. Well, guess what? FanDuel doesn't know that. You don't have to pick the Atlanta Falcons on a moneyline bet. I picked the Falcons on a moneyline bet this week. I did pick the Vikings to cover. So my team didn't win, but you can make sure, if you're a new customer, make sure you join FanDuel. Take advantage of that action. Whether it's, in addition to that money line bet, for those bonus bets, you can bet on spreads, player props, over unders, so much more. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you can kick off this NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. So I do want to get into some positives, but let's talk a little bit about Arthur Smith's job security, because I already know the comments, the chat, all that stuff and more is, going crazy. Fire Arthur Smith. Fire Arthur Smith. Again, very emotional reaction, understandable. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, now with this quarterback switch, Arthur Smith becomes a lot more scrutinized, because, you went into the season talking a big game about Desmond Ridder is going to be your guy. I did too. Right. But, I'm going to keep getting these checks. I don't know about you guys, but my job ain't on the line. So I could sit here and talk about, Liam McCullough's, MVP, and, I'm going to keep getting these checks. So I can say whatever I want. That's me. It ain't my job on the line. So I can basically, I'm saying I can afford to be wrong about that, is basically what I'm saying. But this quarterback move is going to put Arthur Smith under a lot more scrutiny. And, as the comments are, I'm sure, in the chat is raging, saying we got to fire Arthur Smith. They're not going to fire Arthur Smith. Certainly not now. Right? The Falcons are 4-5. They're in second place. They still have 8 winnable games left this season. Probably not going to run the table. I'd love to see it, but don't look like that's going to happen. And the season's probably going to come down to a Week 18 showdown. Winning, you're in, sort of win the division, sort of for the NFC South crown, with the Saints sort of taking over the lead there. And then, given how the NFC is, the Falcons still in the running for a wild card spot, although this loss to the Vikings certainly is going to hurt them, put them behind the 8 ball when it comes to a tiebreaker. in that regard. But all of these questions, all the scrutiny is going to, the big topic that's going to be discussed over the next 2 months, I should say, is going to be, is that seat under Arthur Smith heating up? Is his job security? Is it as secure as we thought it was going into the season? And I certainly think it's warmer today than it was 2 months ago. We'll see if it's even warmer at the end of the season. But, that's a January conversation, not necessarily a November conversation. But I think Arthur Smith can cool things down if he can start to solve some of these problems that we're talking about just beyond the quarterback. Much is made about the quarterback, but again, the whole let's go back 2 months, guys. Let's go back 6 months. The whole selling point of this season was that, hey, we don't need to have a great quarterback. We just kind of need to have like average quarterback play, which is kind of what the Falcons have been getting, whether it was Ridder or Heinicke, contrary to popular opinion, because we have this elite running game. We have one of the better offensive lines, if not one of the best offensive lines in football. We have multiple dynamic skill position players, right? And we have a quality ascending defense. And the only thing that's really lived up to that billing has been the defense. In the last 2 weeks, they look like they're starting to run out of steam, right? In terms of being that unit. Again, I kind of thought they were a little bit overrated when people were like, oh, this is one of the best defenses in the league. Like, they don't look that good. I mean, on paper, they're doing great. They're looking like a top 10 unit, but they don't play like a top 10 unit, at least to my eyes on film. I compare them to that 2017 defense that was, basically a league average unit, which, in the city of Atlanta, at least from a football standpoint, not necessarily if you go outside of Atlanta to a town up the road, Athens, but at least in the city limits of Atlanta, league average is good in Atlanta based off of recent history. But that's kind of what I think this defense has been and probably will be, although, we'll see how that goes. But everything else besides the defense, the run game, the offensive line, the playmakers, they have not consistently lived up to their billing. And it's the run game, the Arthur Smith bread and butter, is the thing that's been, to me, the biggest disappointment, because you've had 3 games where the run game has been really effective. They've had moments here and there in the other 6 games, but 3 games where you could reliably say we can run the football and move the football that way. Right? And while the quarterback gets all the attention, I think the matter is that the Falcons having an average to below average. Some metrics say that they have a bottom 5 running game, depending on what metrics you look at. Others say they have like a league average run game. But like bottom 5 in the Falcons run game shouldn't belong in the same sentence, guys. That's kind of, to me, the real heart of the problem. Right? That Arthur Smith's entire offensive identity was built around having this dynamic, varied, dominant run game. And you're just getting league average at best. And that's kind of the downfall of this team. So while we continue to have conversations about the quarterback, because it's the quarterback, it ain't really about the quarterback. Right? So, and basically I'm sitting here saying, like, that, we're not going to spend too much time talking about Arthur Smith's job security, because we're focused on the present, not necessarily, the future. If we need to have that, well, if we cross that bridge, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But in the meantime, in the present, we're like, how do we fix the problem so that we're not having that conversation come January about Arthur Smith's job security? And to me, it starts with, you got to get this run game back on track. And again, seeing that on that final drive was like, this is the Falcons run game that I remember seeing for most of last season. This is the run game I saw in the first 2 weeks of the season, and also against Tampa Bay. I need to see this more, not just on one drive a game. I need to see this, again, I'm not expecting you to do that, run for 57 yards on 11 carries on every drive of the game, because that would mean that you would get a 500 yards rushing. But can we get like 3 or 4 of those drives a game like we used to? That's all I'm asking for. That's what we used to do. And then a sprinkling here or there. So I'm looking forward to that. So, we'll wrap up today's episode talking some positives. before we get into the positives, some injury updates. Didn't get a quite update immediately after the game, but I know Mac Hollins and KhaDarel Patterson exited the game with ankle injuries. David Onyemata got nicked up late on that final game-winning drive. He did come back in the game, but didn't look 100%. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on because, I don't know. Basically, we saw Grady Jarrett get nicked up in a game, come back in, and then tear his ACL the next week. And it's like, okay. Again, I know I'm being doom and gloom, but I'm just like, I don't know. It's very similar to what happened with Grady. It just looked the same with Grady against Tampa Bay. So we'll see. But positives. If we thought the run game was going to need to pick up the slack because of Drake London's absence, and not meant to be a shot at Drake London. Drake London wasn't really missed today. Like, the Falcons' shortcomings from a passing standpoint were, to me, more quarterback related than they were receivers weren't getting open. Like, the quarterback was missing throws more so than the receivers weren't getting open. And, Jonnu Smith, KhaDarel Hodge had nice days. Kyle Pitts had another sort of solid, 4 or 5, 50-yard type of game that Kyle Pitts has sort of been the norm for him this season, much to the chagrin of the fantasy football community. They're like, can we get a touchdown? Algier got to get them touchdowns. But Hodge, I was joking with the Locked On Falcons insiders, and you guys can become a Locked On Falcons insider by hitting that joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons link in the description below. You'll get my insights in-game, post-game, pre-game, as well as get access to the extended All 22 review each and every week, as well as other insights and information, one-on-one conversation. You can provide your feedback, ask questions, whatever, get some, give you my mother's corn pudding recipe for Thanksgiving if you need that. But I was joking with those folks that KhaDarel Hodge versus zone coverage is basically Justin Jefferson versus any coverage. No, it was a joke, but Hodge versus zone, that connection between him and Heinicke looked pretty good. Jonnu Smith had a big explosive play in this game. Unfortunately, the jet sweep. But other than that, Jonnu was cooking. Had a 60-yard touchdown on a screen pass against cover zero, basically pulling his own version of Julio Jones that he did against the Eagles a couple years ago. That was the Falcons' first explosive 20-plus yard touchdown of the year. Their first since week 10 of last year. They went 16 games. They went a full season without explosive. Again, that's part of the problem. Like, we were like, hey, we're going to be a much more explosive offense this year with all these playmakers. And like, they are more explosive than they were the last 2 years, but barely. And, the fact that they went 16 games without getting a 20-plus yard touchdown was, I looked it up and I was like, they've had like a couple of 8 and 9 game droughts under Arthur Smith, which again is part of the problem with the whole Arthur Smith not being explosive and the intentionality, all that stuff that you've heard me complain about, steadily for the last 2 years. But going back deeper, it's like they never went more than like 4 or 5 games. I think the longest they went was like a 9-game stint in like 2015 where they didn't have any of those explosive, which is why they went out there the next offseason and added Taylor Gabriel and Aldrick Robinson and Mohamed Sanu, all those guys. And then they were the most explosive offense in the league. So we can hope that, 2024 is going to be our 2016 resurgence. But, feels so far away from that. I did not think we were going to get 2015 parallels this season. So that's what's disappointing. Oh man. I know some people thought this was going to be the 2016 year. And I was like, okay, they have not delivered on that. So hopefully they will, circle the wagons. That's what they need to do. Get a win against Arizona next week. Again, 5-5 going into the bye week to me was like, it's not the end of the world, but they lose next week, what is it? December 21st, 2012. Yeah. December 20th. That's basically what we'll be at, not quite the end of the world, but pretty inching closer. So they got it. Next week is a must win against Kyler Murray and company. So we'll have you covered here all week long. Continue to make us your first listen. Make sure you check out Locked On NFL if you want to get the scoop on what's going on around the rest of the league. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.